If you told me back in 2010 what I would be doing in 2019, I wouldn't have believed you. If you told me that the girl that I asked out at 16 years old would become my fiancé 10 years later, I would have called you crazy. If you told me that shooting music videos for $150 would turn into a full-time career, I would have definitely laughed and said, maybe if I'm lucky. That 16-year-old kid with long hair and dreams of becoming a rock star was a bit stubborn. Luckily, it worked out for me, but it took a decade. This past decade was the biggest season of growth for me. From 16 to 26 years old, I went from a teenager to a young adult. I learned very early on that if I wanted to live life on my own terms, I was gonna have to work for it. No one was gonna give me a free handout or a shortcut to some dream career, and they didn't. So I devoted my time figuring out how I was gonna make it work. And I made some big mistakes along the way, but with each mistake, it just pushed me closer and closer towards that goal I was trying to achieve. I went from playing music in my parents' living room to moving my whole life to Los Angeles with no money and no plan. I learned very quickly how expensive it is to afford rent in Los Angeles. I spent the next few years there working my ass off, doing anything I could to get one step closer to my goals. And after some trial and error, people started hiring this 21-year-old kid to use a camera, and they hired me again and again. I went from the production assistant to the cinematographer. I landed a full-time job at a production company that took me to some of the largest music festivals around the world. I met a group of guys that became some of my closest friends. We went on what we called guycations, where we would travel around the whole world just for the hell of it. We created memories that we would never forget and formed a brotherhood unlike anything I had ever had before. I was finally building momentum in Los Angeles, DPing and directing projects that I had always dreamed of. But there was still one dream of mine that I had never let go since I was a 16-year-old kid: to travel the world as a touring videographer. I tried and failed so many times and felt like it was one of those things that just wasn't achievable. But a few years later, I finally got my shot. That dream I had as a 16-year-old kid was finally happening 7 years later. I've spent the past 3 years traveling with different artists and going to parts of the world that I never thought I would get to. It's easy for these videos to come off as extremely braggy, but if you look back at the past 10 years of my life, I've had so many more failures than I've had wins. This journey to get to where I am today was not easy, and I'd be lying to you if I said I didn't have moments of doubt. There were so many times where I felt like giving up because nothing was happening even though I was putting in the work. But I just kept pushing because I felt like something could happen eventually. And that's exactly why I made this video. If you have goals that you're pushing for and maybe it's not working out for you right now, keep doing the same thing that you're doing, because it's only gonna take that one moment where all of your hard work is finally gonna pay off. That's what happened with me, but it took a decade.